Today, I'm going to show you how to make some braided leather bracelets using just a few basic tools. And the trick is they're not actually braided, but it really looks like they are. And they're really quick to make, so let's get started. So here at the bottom are the essential tools that you'll need to make this bracelet. Then up here are some optional ones that'll help speed up the process and help it look just a little bit nicer. So to start, we need to figure out what leather we want to use. And I have two recommendations here. Veg tan will be best for this, and I'd recommend at least a 4 to 5, but probably more like a 5 to 6 ounce veg tan, because you need it to have a decent bit of structure so it doesn't get all floppy and look bad. And we sell panels of it like this. You can see I've already cut into and dyed this one, but you could get it natural, like with this one, or you could have a lot of fun with veg tan because it accepts dyes, and you could do fun stuff like some of this. And if you're curious on how I got any of these looks, we have some videos linked down below for some fun ways to dye leather, so check those out after this. So let's say I want to use this one. This is thick enough. I think this is a 5 to 6 ounce, so that should be great. So we need to cut out what will become our bracelet. And there's a pretty simple formula for this, so I'll go over that now. You're going to start off by measuring your own wrist or the wrist of your customer, whoever you're making this for. And you can do that with the tape measure, of course, or just any string will do. And you'll notice I'm measuring this tight. I'm not doing any slack right now. I'll factor in slack in just a moment. So right about there. So I'll hold that spot. And for me, my wrist is just under 7.5 inches. So I'll round up to 7.5. And so for our bracelet, I want to add about 1 inch of slack. So that would get us to 8.5. And also when we do the braiding or the flipping, that's going to shrink it down a little bit too. So I'll do a 1/2 inch allowance for that. So that means the grand total is my wrist, 7.5, plus 1 inch of slack, plus 1/2 inch of, I'll call it braid allowance, since it gets shorter as you braid it. So for me, I'm going to cut my leather to 9 inches. So I know my length is going to be 9, but let's talk about the width. So looking at this one that I've already made, I want the width to be about equal to what the snap is going to be, which if you measure, it's just slightly over 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to kind of more or less eyeball slightly over 1/2 inch. And here's one of those optional tools. This is called a strap end punch, and it just makes a nice rounded end instead of having to cut it manually. So this is a time saver, and it also looks really nice. So now I'll find my 9 inch point, which is the total length I need. Trim that down next. This is called a wing divider, and I like to use this to find the center of this piece of leather, and I actually draw a line down the center, and you'll see why here in just a second. And I'm pretty much just eyeballing this, finding the center line, and that'll give me something to base the rest of my cuts off of. So speaking of the center of the width, I need to find the center of the length. This is a center finding ruler that I use all the time. And so it's got 0 points here and numbers here. So I see 4.5 right there and 4.5 right there. You could obviously use a regular ruler and do the math and find 4.5, but not a lot of people use these, but I want to show it off a little bit because I use it a lot. All right, so now that I've got the center in the center, we can start the fun part of the project. So this is a flathead utility knife, super basic leatherworking tool. If you're a beginner, probably smart thing to pick up. And so the way I've designed this little bracelet is to use the length of the blade exactly to create little slits all down this leather that we're gonna fold into that braid looking shape. I want this first cut to be centered, so I'll put the center of the blade with the centered dot that I just created. And I'm also kind of falling in that groove right down the middle of the strap that I created. And when I feel good, make the cut, and we've got one slit down. We need a series of those slits, so to space them out evenly, I'll bring out the wing divider again, and I'm going to adjust it to 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to put one prong of the wing divider at the end of that slit and create a dot 1/4 inch from the end of the slit on each side. Now that I have 2 little dots as a guideline for my next slits, that'll be my starting point. So I'll put the edge of the blade on that dot, keep it centered, make the cut. And I'm gonna do this series of making these little slits until I run out of room pretty much. So for me, it looks like I'm gonna be able to get a slit on each side. Depending on the size of the wrist, maybe you can just get 3, maybe you can get more than I can get. But no matter how many slits you have, as long as you start in the middle and go evenly on either side, it's gonna look good in the end. Worst case scenario, you fall a little bit short and you have a little bit of a gap, which is fine. Just make sure you don't cut all the way through. So like I said, for me, that lined up just about perfectly because I've still got to create my hole on either end for the snaps, and I've got just enough room for the snaps, so that'll work out well. So I've got the 4 components of my snap and the snap setter tool, but just before we do that, we need to punch out the holes. And since our strap is the same width as these components, you can kind of use it to find the right position of it. So I'll line this up with both edges as well as the end and mark the center. Same thing here. Now punch out that hole right on top of that dot. And just for fun, I'll use one more optional tool. This is an edge beveler, which will kind of round out the corners of the leather, which is definitely optional for this project. But if you're a beginner and you do more and more leather projects, this is probably something you'll want to invest in because it's what you'll see on a lot of high-end leather goods is nicely beveled and burnished edges. And we'll talk about burnishing in just a moment. All right, now this is probably the moment you've been waiting for and why you clicked on the video. We're gonna create this braided looking shape out of those slits we just created. And it's a very simple process, so choose which is gonna be your top and bottom, and you'll just take the very end of the strap and feed it through each one of the slits, starting from the top and working your way down. And the first one is kind of the trickiest, but just work it through. And when you pull, you can kind of see the shape being created. Now just repeat that all the way through. Watch it snap into place. Pretty nifty. Once you've gone through every slit, you can kind of work out the shape, maybe flatten it a little bit, stretch it out so it all looks uniform. Running it along the edge of the table will also help with this. All right, so let's finish this up by installing the snaps. Whatever side you decide is the top, I like to start off with the button. So put the button through the leather and put the domed part of the button in the domed part of the installation tool. And then set the socket on the post and then set it in place. Now repeat the same thing for the stud and the eyelet. And before you set this, make sure that it's going to line up properly. You wouldn't want it to be upside down because then bracelet wouldn't work. So double check that. Flipping the installation tool over, setting the flat side into those grooves, and hammer. And you could definitely call it quits there, but since this is something that you're going to be wearing, I want to kind of make it a little bit smoother and softer to the touch and round out some of those corners even more. And to do that, I want to burnish pretty much the whole surface of the bracelet. And what burnishing is it's almost like polishing the leather. To do that, you need a burnishing agent. I'm using something called Tokonol. And then you also need something to rub it in with, and canvas or denim works great for that. So I'm doing my best just to get a light coat over the surface and all the nooks and crannies. Now the surface is coated, so I'll just buff it with my canvas. Now we've got a more smooth surface all the way across the bracelet, which will feel better as you wear it, and you don't see as much of the fuzzy parts of the flesh side of the leather. And as you see, with the formula I used to measure the length of the bracelet, ended up fitting just about right. If you want a looser fit, you could obviously add length, or a tighter fit, take away about 1/4 of an inch. So that's how this bracelet is made. Pretty simple process. That took me maybe 10 minutes or so, if that. I've already made a few today, just experimenting with different things. This one is just all natural veg tan, which are really, especially since you wear it on your wrist, this is really gonna patina nicely over time. So for example, like this watch band is also natural veg tan, and after about 2 months, you can see how dark it's gotten. And then I'll skip that one for now and go to this one. This one is very much like the green one I did. It was with this leather right here, which had a unique dye on it. And so you've got the blue and the lighter underside of the leather, but maybe you don't like the contrast, seeing 2 main colors. Here's a black one where the top of the leather was dyed black, as well as the flesh side, so it's black on black. And on this one, if you look really close, you'll even see some black stitch marks for a little extra detail that I was experimenting with. And I really liked the way that those stitches look, so I created what we've been calling the pretzel bracelet because of the color scheme. But it's got 2 layers of leather, so it's kind of a more premium version of these bracelets, because it takes a little bit more work putting those 2 layers together. But in addition to the 2 layers, it's also got that nice stitch line. So kind of the closer you look at it, the more little details you see. And so I think this one's my favorite so far, but like I said, took a little bit of extra work, but still under half an hour. So whether you experiment with adding stitches, dyeing it different ways, these bracelets are quick to make, inexpensive, and make amazing gifts or things to sell at your local markets. And if you're brand new to leather crafting, I'll link our Beginner's Guide to Leathercraft series in the description below, and I'll also link some of the tools I use. These are all great beginner tools that you're going to use throughout your entire experience of being a leather crafter. Thanks for watching, and go make some bracelets.